I'm going to tell you something that I hate to admit. There are so many people today that are facing ADHD, dyslexia, autism, autoimmunity, depression, anxiety, and so many other things. And it's really reaching epidemic proportions. And that's something a lot of people don't want to hear. It's something that I don't want to tell anybody. But when we look around, there's not much discussion about this. We see ADHD continuing to skyrocket. We see autism. When I was in high school, it was something like 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 40 throughout the nation. In areas, it's 1 in 8. The numbers are astronomical. When I got diagnosed with autoimmunity in the early 2000s, the chances of me having Hashimoto's thyroiditis were 1 in 100,000. And now it's just commonplace. There's so many people that are facing this. Something has to change with what we're doing. And today we're going to talk about the importance of developing cognitive function in general and how that plays into the health of everything else. So I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro, and ultimately in my clinic, what we do is we work to build the hardware and the software of the system. So, if we have the brain and the body working really, really well, that's a big part of things, but it's not everything. If we just have a Ferrari sitting in the driveway, it doesn't do any good without the gas, right? So we've got to have the hardware, but we also have to have the software. We've got to have the energy systems to drive that brain and body. And if we don't have those together, then we don't have much. When we get those two together, everything works seamlessly, right? Or at least more seamlessly than when we don't have one of those things. So let's go ahead and dive in here today. And we're going to do a little bit of drawing as we go here, but ultimately what I want you to take out of this is cognitive development is something that we can alter, right? It's something that can be improved. And let's go ahead and start here. Let's see. Let's get a black pen. Come on, there we go. Okay, so when we look at the brain, the first part that really starts to develop is the brain stem. And we have to have this brain stem because it is the automatic functions of everything. If we don't have the automatic functions, then nothing works. So inside of this lies the foundations of our stress system, the respiration centers, the cardiac centers, all those different things. It's a very, very important part of things. And what we see developmentally that can hold back cognitive function, and we see this on all of those examples I gave you above. We see this on ADHD and dyslexia, autoimmunity, autism, anxiety, depression. Very, very common to have areas of the brainstem that are not as functional as what they should be. Primitive reflexes are a way to look at this. Now, when we stereotypically look at this, the upper brainstem is functioning okay. Where we're not having that function is right down here in this lower brainstem, the pons and medulla. And that's something we want to work to build as we go forward. But this is the foundation of the system. If we don't have all of this operational, it's very, very hard. So I want you to look at this as when we get a computer that comes in the box, we've got to set up the computer, right? This is really the setup of the computer. And what we're going to do is we're going to take it through a series of upgrades as we go through that. So, ultimately what we end up doing is developing a lollipop is a great example for this. Okay, so this has been the way of it today. Things have not been going quite as smoothly as what I hoped they would. But we're getting the bad day out of the way, right? So, again, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the brain as a lollipop. It's a great analogy for this because we first get that brain stem developed, and then once we have that brain stem developed, we come down here and we develop some of the initial aspects of the brain, right? These are the things that are lower level functioning, the emotionality and all these different things, limbic function, all that good stuff. And this limbic function is very, very important because it allows us to it gives us that link to safety. It gives us that link to the stress response that helps keep us alive. All of these different things are very, very important, right? But if we don't have all of these things linked together the right way, then things escape. And we're going to put all of this together as we go through this. So bear with me here. So the next upgrade that we end up going through puts another little layer around all of this. And again, these are some of the sensory functions and different things like that. And then after we go through our final development is where we really start to get all of the upper level functions that come with this. So our brain ends up being all of this. Cerebellum would be down in here. And ultimately, this part up in here is really the part that makes us human. That's the prefrontal cortex. And we see this in a lot of different ways. We see this in the science and the math and the reasoning and all these different functions that come with us. And we see deficits in this anytime that we look at ADHD, anytime we look at autism, anytime we look at autoimmunity or anxiety or depression or any of these things, we start to see some of these functions that aren't working the way that they should be. Now, why is this? Because we have to have these lower level functions down here working as good as we possibly can, because everything builds up from here. If we don't have some of the functionality here, we can't get some of the functionality up here. And the key to this is, this doesn't show up on MRI or different things like that, right? Because the brain tissue is still there. It's just not getting the stimulation that it should be. And we can look at this just like we look at a house, right? So you've got your house built, but you've got to have the strong foundation underneath the house to actually have it there. If you build it on sand, it's going to shift, the house is going to fall down, right? Same thing here. If we build all of our brain tissue based off of this area right here not working correctly, then we don't get some of these upper level functions. And in all of these scenarios, whether that is ADHD, whether it's autism, whether it's dyslexia, autoimmunity, any of that, almost all of them have some level of prefrontal cortex dysfunction. Now, that prefrontal cortex can come with other areas. Some of them come with, parietal function that's thrown off. This area back in here, some of them come with temporal areas that are thrown off. And we get different symptoms with each of those different things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that each one is unique and each one has certain things. Everybody is going to be different. Everybody is going to have a different experience based on this development down here. So, correlating all this together, many people in society have sensory issues, right? Sensory issues are very closely tied to this. Why are sensory issues tied to this? Because if we don't have, perfect vision, it throws off some of the occipital lobe, right? That's the part that comes from that. If we don't have proper smell, it throws off the rhinencephalon is the part of the brain down around the temporal parietal complex, and some of that development doesn't come along. If we don't have some of these areas that feed into this area in here, that prefrontal cortex, some of that is delayed. And the importance in all of this working together is our cognitive function is not just one part. It's not just in the prefrontal cortex. It's not just in the parietal cortex. It's not just in the temporal cortex. It's in the networks that develop in all of those connections that go, from every which direction there. They're connecting all these different areas together. And the level of function that you have is related to the amount of connectivity that you have, right? So if you have really strong connectivity in one thing, you might have, superhuman traits in some areas, but if you don't have it in other areas, you might not have any skills in that. And we look in autism and they have some of these just incredible talents. They can do, complex math in their head and give you an answer instantaneously. They can tell you what day of the week any date in history or into the future is. I mean, there's some just astronomical levels of ability in some of this. But then we also have the drawbacks of that. Some of those areas in social connectedness aren't there, right? They can't have a conversation with somebody. They can't share some of those ideas, especially with people that don't know them and don't know how to interact with them as well. So, while we have superhuman talents in some areas, we have, areas that really, really hold us back. And that's the importance of getting all of this to function together. And ultimately, this is one of the big things that we look at in all of our patients is which networks are working, which ones are not working. And let's see here. Let's clear all this stuff out. Come on here. But yeah, I mean, it's just like if we're looking at a muscle. So, just say you have, let me get the pen again. Let me see, you have your little person here, and you've got your bicep fires. So you get this muscle right here. But if you have the bicep over here and it's a little bitty muscle, how do we stimulate more muscle on this side? we start doing more exercises over here, right? And when we start doing more exercises in this area, we start to develop that. You get more and more muscle tone, and pretty soon those areas start to even out a little bit. They might not be perfectly even, but they're more even. And when we have that balance, we're able to share those. We're able to use one hand, we're able to use the other hand, and they're similar in talents. And the same thing goes for the brain. And this has so many implications on the body. We talked recently about the stress response. And when we have that stress response, ultimately what happens in the stress response? Like I said, if the brainstem isn't properly developed, we don't have the reflexive systems developed the way that we are supposed to. And there's a lot of theory that this is ultimately what happens in sudden infant death syndrome, in the SIDS, is they don't have that proper lower brainstem development. They don't have the reflexive systems there, and they just basically stop breathing. It doesn't work anymore. Whereas once you get that development, then you can start getting those upper level development. And the more developed we can get that, the better control we have over everything. But what does that stress do in our bodies? Once it gets into our bodies, it increases our blood sugar because it gives us the energy that we need to fight or run away. It increases our blood pressure. So, again, we have the stuff that we need to fight or run away. It increases our clotting factor in case we get scratched. You want to be able to heal it, not bleed to death, right? It increases muscle tone in certain areas, particularly on the front of the upper body and the back of the lower body. So we can either fight or we can run away. It also decreases sexuality. It decreases digestion. It decreases healing and repairing, because if we don't live to the next day, we don't need those things, right? Those are all human desires, but they're not things we need to survive instantly. But what do you have if you have these things over the chronic course of things, right? When you have increased blood sugar for a long period of time, what do they call that? Diabetes. If you have increased blood pressure for a long period of time, what do you have? Heart disease, right? If you have increased clotting factors, what do you have? Strokes. If you have increase in muscle function, what do you have? You can have anything from pain to muscle spasms to scoliosis, or a whole host of other things. If you turn down your digestion, you don't have as good of energy, you don't have as good of gut function. If you turn down healing and repairing, that's a basis of cancer, right? So there's all of these different things that go together. Stress turns up your immune system. When that's on for a long time, we have autoimmunity. We get all of these different things that work intertwined in our bodies. But if we don't have all of the brain function up here to turn that down and run all of this stuff down here, then it all just starts to go in the wrong direction. And that's where things get carried away. So this is the importance of developing that upper level cognitive function. And we're gonna go into some other videos that break this down even further, but this is the importance of having that cognitive function. And what do we see in kids with ADHD and dyslexia and autoimmunity and autism and all that? We see poor gut function, we see poor sleep, we see all of these systems that are falling apart. So as we start to stimulate that brain connectivity, we get it to connect better within itself, we start to see that function develop. And it's not just function that comes up in the brain, it's not just cognitive function that comes with it, it's health in general that comes with it. And that is overall the importance of this. So if you have questions, please reach out to me in some way. You can leave a comment below. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. It gives me very good information as far as what I'm able to share with you guys to give you that next level abilities. So I love and appreciate all of you. I know that your attention is one of the most precious resources, and I appreciate you spending some of it with me. So have a great week, and I'll catch you on next week's video.